Before we get into using SharePoint Designer 2010, we have to talk about SharePoint 2010 itself. As you probably know, SharePoint 2010 does not describe one product. You can't go and actually install something called SharePoint 2010. It's a useful phrase that describes several different products and technologies that can be installed on a server. But if we're going to customize SharePoint 2010, we need to know which particular flavor of SharePoint we're dealing with. And we have three possibilities. First, your system administrator could have installed something called SharePoint 2010 Foundation. This is a free download from Microsoft. It's installed on a back-end Windows server and made available across a network. And SharePoint 2010 Foundation actually includes most of what people talk about when they talk about SharePoint. It includes the ability to make websites, to work with collaboration tools, document management, Office integration, and so on. Alternatively, your sysadmin could have installed SharePoint Server 2010. Now, this is not free, but many organizations will use SharePoint Server 2010 because it adds extra functionality on top of SharePoint Foundation. It is built around SharePoint Foundation, and that means that if you have SharePoint Server 2010, you automatically have every feature that's in SharePoint Foundation and a bunch more besides. Now, SharePoint Server 2010 actually comes in two editions, the Standard Edition and the Enterprise Edition, which adds even more features to this platform. Now, most of these features we don't care about in this course, but there is one feature available in SharePoint Server 2010, both the Standard and the Enterprise versions, that is highly impactful when we're customizing websites, and that's something called the publishing feature, which we'll talk about shortly. So it is important to know whether you just have SharePoint 2010 Foundation or SharePoint Server 2010. Now, how do you know which one you have? The easiest way: ask your administrators, ask the people who installed it. But there are ways of telling, as we'll see later. Now, in this course, we're going to begin with how to customize sites that could be created in every version of SharePoint 2010, and then we'll see how to customize those sites that can only be created in SharePoint Server 2010.